Here to discuss her latest work, the exquisitely uncategorizable The Unwritten Book. What better place to discuss an investigation of ghosts, among other things, which starts with a circulation desk than in a lightly haunted library on a very haunted island. Samantha is the author of 5 books and numerous essays and short stories. A personal favorite is about One Direction. The recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Bard Fiction Prize, the National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35 Prize, the St. Francis College Literary Prize, and a blue ribbon winner of the Montgomery Place Apple Pie Contest. She was also a finalist for the Orange Prize and the Penn Faulkner. When describing my enthusiasm for her work, which tends to defy all plot summaries, I found myself telling people over and over again that it's like she's been digging around in my head. And maybe you feel the same way. Long story short, please welcome a mother of daughters, ghosts, and stories, which really add up to the same thing, Samantha Hunt.
Thank you all. This is amazing. There's so many of you. Thank you for this warm welcome and for, it's such a pleasure to be here again. It's a pleasure to start off the festival. Amazing that Hannah gets to introduce me in her pregnant state too, because that really resonates with a lot of the writing that I do. And Mariah Mitchell is on stage with me, yes. That's the greatest honor. So I'm going to read from The Unwritten Book. One of the structures that really informed this book in the writing, I stole it from W.J. Sebald's novel, I guess you can call it, not really though, The Rings of Saturn. And he writes about the idea of those rings as, frozen ice chunks that somehow are held together by gravity, by magic. And a lot of the way that I write is that it's like, we'll take the idea of the Athenaeum, we'll take the idea of death, we'll take the idea of mothering, and see how they relate to each other. Before we get into that, I was just at a luncheon with the amazing Mary Bergman, and folks there were mentioning Theron Dunn, who the festival is dedicated to, and who I fortunately got to know during my last festival, and what a birder Theron was. And so this is the start of the book, and it's about the birds, and so I just wanted to offer this as an invocation for the entire festival. Circulation desk. The sun will set soon. Birds come to the feeder. Each bird is magnificent. Each bird is weird. How did the birds get so weird? A bright red head, spiky tufts, yellow eyes, pink feet, hidden fluorescence, the ability to fly. How did the word weird get so weird? And my hands, they are also weird. I'm watching the weird world, the weird birds, when a thought arrives from nowhere. What if I've been dead for a long time? What if I've been dead my whole life? If I am dead, the strangeness of existence is momentarily comprehensible. I catch a glimpse or a scent of our dispersed worlds, this place without border, boundary, pain, or punctuation. This place where we are all intimately mixed up with one another. My branch, your book, his leg, her light. All the elements my body and your body have known, a mountain boulder, sediment in the sea, an underground pebble, sand. Everything is ancient, small, and eternal. More birds arrive, more birds leave. My children are playing in the yard. They jump, shriek, and pretend to be something other than their current forms. I hear them speak, and as if waking, my specifics come to collect my body back into being a mother, sister, daughter, wife, friend, a woman who is alive reading a book outside before dusk. In the yard, I shake off enough deadness to go make dinner. My arms feel stronger with the memory of the rocks that make me. but we have been dead a long time. Of bodies changed to various forms I sing. Our repurposed parts, like Frankenstein's creature, are calcium, potassium, phosphorus, sodium, magnesium, remixed into bodies. Everything is forever. No one is going anywhere. Toni Morrison writes, "It's hard to make yourself die forever." Thich Nhat Hanh says, "I have been a cloud, a river, the air." Cristina Rivera Garza tells us, "I know you from when you were a tree, from those times." So I just wanted to quickly say, being at the Athenaeum, is this okay? Are you guys, there's something that's a little, come closer? Is that better? Okay, I'm sorry, did you not hear that? Oh, it was perfect, it was beautiful, trust me. Being here in the Athenaeum is really special, especially, particularly to this book, because it is really a book of books. I was reading in the festival literature that, that my talk is about our communication with the dead. And I'm sorry to those of you coming, expecting a seance. The dead do not talk to me. I wish they would, but they don't really. More what I mean is how my life has been affected by my dead. And the effect that they have on all of us. And I liken it oftentimes to the effect of books in my life. I happen to be married to a journalist who tells our children, Daddy writes the truth and Mommy writes lies. Because most of my work is fiction. And, I wink at my daughters and I'm like, that's not true. And they know, because their favorite books are fiction books. And they know how much their life has been changed by reading fiction and nonfiction. But I think about that similarly, that the effect of the dead in my life is the same effect that the books that I've inhaled in 52 years have on me. Something that's not tangible necessarily, but something that affects everything that I am. And so this next section I want to read is about our relationship with with libraries. The New York Public Library perches on Bryant Park. Blood flowed there in the draft riots. The park is also a potter's field of bodies. The library was built on the site of the Croton Aqueduct, an edifice whose 50-foot tall walls once held the city's water supply. Standing in the library foyer, I remember the water. I swim. I feel fluid in this library. I feel fluid in all libraries because I know how words change. I'm devoted to the paper archive because paper is not permanent. It will decay. It will flow. Sappho wrote her poems on paper that has crumbled. Time and decay give Sappho's words meaning she might never have imagined, a real fermentation, a real growth. Loving libraries, tabernacles of impermanence, is like trying to preserve the most delicate and ephemeral things, the dead katydids on my windowsill, or people, or snowflake crystals, or love. When I was very young, I had a dream about a small door. Crouching through the door, I passed into a series of scarlet, velvety rooms, small, getting smaller, a birth canal in reverse. I know a number of people who have had a similar dream. It gave me terrific comfort. I knew the tunnel contained mystery. In the dream, I never pressed through the tunnel all the way, but rather sat in the small passage, content in the unknowing, hidden. The first time I saw Mr. Morgan's blood-red library, I was reminded of the dream tunnel and thought, this must be the place where that tunnel led, the Morgan, or a golden bookstore, or some uncanny, cranny-filled Athenaeum. Wonder which one I had in mind. I'm a very slow reader, so a vision of death as a place where I'll finally get some reading done is heaven indeed. In death, might we have access to the infinite stacks of books we never got around to in life? books written by insects, trees, bacteria, and rocks. In death, might we have access to the books that never had a chance to get written? Those books stored in a place whose system of classification escapes recognizable logic, much like the system in the narrow frame of my own body, where Les Fleurs de Mal rubs up against Flowers in the Attic, rubs up against my undergraduate geology textbook, Willard Bascom's Waves and Beaches. Bascom made me realize that our very human attempts to make language, to label waves in the sea, matter little to said waves. Language making is fascinating, but also absurd, since classification is fleeting. Bascom wrote that in a storm, concepts of wave period and length tend to lose their meaning. Where I live, storms approach out of the mountains and across a wide river. I see them coming from a long way off. The terror they bring is a welcome feeling for me, the possibility of stopping, of newness and chaos. Though climate change complicates my love of storms by adding fear and regret. George Perec writes that Rabbi Simeon finds 70 different meanings for Bereshit in the beginning, the first word of the Torah. Loss of meaning is only a loss if you only have one narrow meaning. In this afterlife library, we'll dissolve back into the many, the microscopic. I'll browse, I'll read, I'll lose concepts of period and length. I'll lose bits of myself in books, in soil. Alphabet as molecule, page as ecosystem. Here's the natural science section, here's poetry, here's the universe. Skin cells will become dust, flesh, food, bone to stone. Along with every book we've never had the chance to read in life, we might find the ghost books, too, texts that were never written or never finished, phantom books with invisible and unverifiable Dewey Decimal numbers. I have lost my mind to books, that is true. I sometimes study a book to the point of obsession. I paw at it until I've worn through the very fabric of sanity. Sometimes it's fun, like being addicted to crosswords. The universe is filled with clues, even if it's not. What I mean is there's an owl outside my house at 3 a.m. talking to another owl. I imagine the nature of their conversation, but I bet I'm wrong. I haven't yet learned the language of the birds. That's okay. Delusion can be close to revelation. Birding delights me. Believing delights me. It's a game. It's artifice. It's art. Barry Holston Lopez writes of the great blue heron, "If you will not speak, I will have to consider making you up." Can I go without a microphone? Is that, because that ringing, is that driving you all crazy? Yeah. Is it, can you guys hear me in the back if I go without a mic? You can't? What's that? No? Is there anything to do about that ringing tone? I worry about people's ears. It's pretty horrible, is that what you said? Oh, you don't hear it? Okay, good. If it's just me, that's great. You guys all okay with the sound? Very close. If I stay here, is that good? Okay. All right. I'll stay right here. Okay. Sorry. I just wanted, before we go on, to clarify that. So, part of my attempt of this book, which maybe is a foolish attempt, was to, how could I make death stop hurting me as much as it does? And, it was an interesting experiment to think about the good places that death interacts with my life. This next part's a little bit about that. One daughter asks me, "Where is your dad?" He's a cardinal now, a story my siblings and I came up with after he died, something to make death bearable and visible. Like a bird, she asks. Yes, I said, and then sometimes we have 4 or 5 cardinals in the yard at the same time. It's not a magical deduction. It's not supernatural. It's reading. After my dad was gone, I took books from his library thinking I could build a small replica of him inside of me by reading what he had read. My father had been so smart. He'd been so full of book learning. Having him with me was like having a walking work of reference before the internet. I could ask him anything, and chances are that he knew something, not necessarily on every topic, but near every topic. If my interests were Irish holy wells, he might know something about an Appalachian spring. A tangent that might become a new path, like browsing the stacks at a library and not finding the book that you're looking for, but finding the book you weren't looking for. One of the books I took from my dad was Joseph Twaddle Shipley's The Dictionary of Word Origins. I'm not sure what this book meant to my father in life, or even how often he referred to it. But after he was gone, I asked the dictionary the things I could no longer ask him. Word origins became a place for talking with the dead, a tool of divination. It's never far from my hand. One of the best parts about Shipley's dictionary is that in an effort to be efficient, he points out the relationships between words. He builds beautiful and astonishing connections. On a day that I miss my dad, I might look up the word die, searching for a hint or a way to better understand sorrow. And Shipley, because his dictionary is capacious, responds with die, see sequin. The whole death maid isn't filled, but it flashes with glitter. Romantic trouble? I asked Shipley, sounding much like my dad, writes, boy, see a lass. When my body was battered by doctors, Shipley told me, gynecology, see banshee. His work is poetry. It illuminates and broadens my understanding as verse does. It makes me feel part of all. It makes gentle sense, spreading joy and curiosity. It suggests that wisdom is not hierarchical. There's no ladder going up, but cyclical, relational. Sometimes I have no question, but I open Shipley to any old page, throwing the bones. Phantom, see focus. Fashion, see defeat. Rape, see alcohol. Sometimes I don't even follow up with Shipley's reference words, enjoying and imagining the electric distance between phantom and focus. Other times I keep reading and I'm further rewarded. Devour, see sarcophagus. Sarcophagus. The ancient Greeks buried bodies in coffins or pits made of a kind of limestone which supposedly consumed them. They called this coffin a sarcophagus. My dad had been sick for about a year with lung and colon cancer when he collapsed upstairs. I was at work, but my brother Charlie took care of him. From the floor, my dad said, maybe if I had something sweet to eat, he'd regain his strength. Charlie brought him a chocolate donut with rainbow sprinkles, the sort of confection my father loved. My dad ate half of the donut before admitting that something more serious was wrong with his body. Charlie and my mom took him to the hospital. We created a lot of stories when our dad was sick, things to believe in, like hospitals stop death, or maybe you just need something sweet to eat, then you'll feel better. The morning after he died, I lay down in that place where he'd collapsed at home. It had been a week since he'd fallen there. From this position, I had a good view underneath the cabinet. There, among the dust bunnies, I found the other half of the chocolate donut. I swallowed the half donut quickly before I could think. because I suspected that if I didn't eat it right away, I'd be stuck with this donut for the rest of my life, making a monument out of a half-eaten piece of cake. Soon after I ate the donut, I went searching through the house for more of my dad. What else could I eat? He'd lived in that house for more than 30 years. He was everywhere except that he was gone. I found his black-winged pencils in each room, crosswords finished and unfinished. I started collecting everything, like a detective bagging up evidence I'd use to make a new narrative. In one desk drawer, I found a handful of typed pages from a book my dad had been writing about people who could fly without wings. I clung to those pages. I had so many unanswered questions from my father. Some really basic ones like, what hospital were you born in? Where's the money you left for mom? What happened when you were drafted? Who were your childhood friends? How did you make that pot roast with the onion soup mix? Some questions were less basic. Where are you? What are you thinking? Do you miss us as much as we miss you? Even more than the books in his library, the pages in my hand were something I could work with. With these pages, I thought, I'll talk with the dead. And I knew, even at the start, that the answers to my questions would not be simply presented. They might not be clear. Clarity's a lot to ask from someone who can no longer breathe. But I could read my dad's writing. I could make interpretations and solve mysteries. I could build references. Even when rocks are busted up into tiny bits or transformed by heat and erosion, geologists can still gather information. These pages felt like that. My dad had changed, but he'd left behind clues, building materials. I didn't eat my father's book. I devoured it. As I read the first pages, the ground felt uncertain in a way that excited me, like beginning an adventure. I didn't know what I was looking at. Was this fiction or nonfiction? The pages from his desk drawer start with an epigraph. There's no title, no dedication, no middle, no end. Just a section of a book, a handful of pages. A start that I'll reproduce here, but before I start with that start, a quick note on what I've done. When I was breastfeeding my twins, 1 kid per boob, that's really something that we can all take a moment just to envision, right? Yeah. That's how it happens, folks. My eyes had to work together. Oh, sorry, wait. 1 kid per boob. I'd rest a book between their heads and consider the tremendous symmetry of our bodies. It frustrated me that, unlike my boobs, my eyes had to work together. I could not read 2 separate streams of text at once. 1 eye on the left, 1 on the right. I wanted to read 2 books at the same time. What greed, what a hunger for books. I couldn't do it. Maybe you can. Scattered throughout my book are parts of my dad's unfinished book, mixed with and marred by my thoughts, a work of reference. In 1 eye, a fragment from a methodically constructed narrative written by Walter Hunt. In the other eye, evidence collected by a daughter detective trying to interrogate her dead dad. I'm not going to read you the sections from my dad because it's really hard to go back and forth, but I just want to show you what I'm talking about. So, you know, like right boob, left boob. You can think of it if you want, if that helps. I do want to read just one more section to you, and then maybe some people have questions. Maybe not. As Hannah was saying, though, there's a bunch of different essays that interrogate all different ways that we relate to the dead, including an essay on the boy band One Direction, which you might be like, what? Okay, but I'm not going to read you that section right now. I'm going to read you a section called Mediums. So even though I said no seances, this part is a little seancey. Anne's apartment is on a quiet street beside a park. The lobby has marble tiles, pre-war. Her office is on the first floor in the front corner. the space usually reserved for doctors and dentists. But unlike a doctor or dentist, there's no delayed billing, no insurance company to obscure the financial transaction at the heart of Anne's ministrations. You give her money, she tells you a story. It does not escape my notice that this is very similar to my own job description. I enter a bright white room, empty beside some artwork on the walls. Anne calls out from the back, and I go toward her voice, leaving the sunshine for the dark, windowless office with brown walls. It's like a film noir set. Anne plays a stereotype. Her blonde wig is askew. She wears chunky jewelry and has coral lipstick on her front teeth, painted on eyebrows. Her fake nails are white. The table beside her is covered with old, odd lotions and medicines. A small couch is upholstered in synthetic wool, cream, and brown. I brought a few reproduced portraits of Charlotte Bronte. I want Anne to ask Charlotte what she thinks of my new book. I've come here for a blurb. I don't like the process of collecting blurbs for my books, those bits of praise from other authors stuck on the back jacket. Wuthering Heights, Anne asks. That's her sister, Emily. Charlotte wrote Jane Eyre. Yes, they made a movie. Yes, I didn't see it. Neither did I. I don't mention the other Bronte sister, though she and my medium share a name. If a person can talk to the dead, they have access to the most voluminous library already, right? I settle in for my reading. That term used in mediumship turns me into the book. How legible am I? Anne tries to collect information about my life. I try to obscure it, as if I'm there to test her skills rather than rely on them. This is a problem. I don't believe in any of this. Anne asks about my husband. Is he very romantic? I stay focused on the blurb. She asks about my novel. I remain vague. I don't want a blurb from Anne. I want her to get in touch with Charlotte Bronte, but Anne is curious. She enjoys this story. There's a man and a woman? Yes. I speak slowly. My book has both male and female characters. Ah, a romance, she intuits. I shrug. Not really. Not a romance? Not really. So then there's a murder. Recently, the New York Times described me as an established horror writer. Both words, established and horror, were a revelation to me. I do write about death, and perhaps at this time, the die being cast to write of death is to write horror. It just strikes me as funny, because in all earnestness, while I wouldn't file my work under the heading of romance, I really do believe that I'm writing love stories over and over again. The dead do not scare me. Indeed, many of the people I love most in this world are dead. Silence ticks between us. What's the difference between fortune-telling and familiarity with genre? When my daughters watch TV, I know how their shows will end. Am I psychic? Can I predict the future? We're all gonna die, right? The first time I paid an older woman to talk to the dead for me, I was at Lilydale, the City of Light, a spiritualist summer camp in Western New York. Like nearby Chautauqua, Lilydale has an antique atmosphere. It's a gated community of gingerbread homes where people focus on communications with the dead. Lakes, forests, and pet cemeteries dot the campus. My oldest daughter came with me. She was 2 at the time. We strolled past fairy houses, past the library and museum. We made our way up to Inspiration Stump. The name invokes teenagers and heavy petting, but Inspiration Stump is actually an open-air amphitheater in the woods. Twice daily during the high season, Visiting and local mediums contact the dead. Attendees gather hoping from a word for their departed. During my visit, the mediums were joyful, humorous, or new agey. Some sounded like somber auctioneers. I'm speaking with Harry. Yes, anyone here looking for Harry? Sorry, no, Larry. Anyone Larry? Not Larry, it's Mary. Who's looking for Mary? I didn't necessarily feel the presence of the dead at Inspiration Stump, but I felt their impact on us, the not yet dead. Bereaved mothers were there looking for their children. Though I was new to mothering, I knew the loss of a child would mean never fully returning to the land of the living. These women faced the impossibility of death, held out hope that in the woods of Western New York, comfort might exist. These mothers insisted on life despite their familiarity and proximity to death. What bravery they demonstrated. This insistence was what I'd come to Lilydale to see and feel. We were given a small room in one of Lilydale's 2 hotels. A number of the regulars gathered on the large porch, as folks might gather before dinner in a nursing home. An older woman in a wheelchair admired my daughter and made a gift to her, a very cool hand-cranked flashlight that advertised the daily ghost tours through Lilydale. As a spiritualist tool, the flashlight struck me as odd. Spiritualists believe communication with the deceased is natural and desirable, so what's scary in the dark? My daughter loved the present. Our room in the hotel was simple: bed, dresser, and lamp. Communal bathrooms were down the hall, past a sign that advised, "Please, no readings, healings, or seances in the hotel. Thank you." These quarters belonged to the living. My mother was angry I brought my daughter to Lilydale. Why, I asked. What's the harm? You don't believe in ghosts. Of course I don't believe in ghosts. Then what are you afraid of? Nothing. Her voice was unconvincing. What other unnameable thing was frightening my mother was also frightening me. Maybe people who believe in ghosts are scary. I didn't sleep that night. I kept vigil over our room, self-cranking flashlight in hand. By morning, I was ready to flee Lilydale, head up to Niagara to wash away my ghost hangover. People who had seemed quirky the day before looked lost at breakfast. Their grief was so heavy. Why was I here? The woman who received me in her house wore polyester pants. She had frosted hair and rouged temples. She invited me onto her converted porch. Women, she said, come on this side of my body, men on the other. And that was it for preliminaries. She began, there's a woman here, she wears emerald rings on her finger. The medium checked to see if I knew this ghost. I had no idea. I come from Iowa farmers on one side and Brooklyn Irish on the other. Fingers covered in gemstones seemed unlikely. But my skepticism, even my outright non-belief, did not matter because the bejeweled woman said her piece. There's a man here who wants you to know that in life he never would have passed through these gates. The door unlocked and I was blubbering on her converted porch. Your father? I nodded. Well, he's here. Is there anything you'd like to say to him? That half hour I spent with that woman was time collapse therapy, years of work waded through in minutes, and it only cost $60. She presented my dead dad as a willing participant in conversation, and it turned out I had nothing to say. We hadn't left things unsettled or unspoken. He loved me, I loved him. He was great, mythic, messed up dad. He told me a lifetime of stories. He made me love books. In 1/2 hour, the medium made it clear that even though I miss my dad, it's okay for him to be done living. Back with Anne in Albany, while I hate to admit it, I tell her, Mr. Splitfoot does contain a kind of murder. Sort of. She's right. I knew it. I saw it, she says. She's lying on the floor in a pool of blood. How'd he do it, with a gun? I shake my head. There's no blood at all. Still, I like a faulty medium, seems exposed. I asked Charlotte Bronte for a blurb. Asking the dead felt much less humiliating than asking a living author. I had a feeling Charlotte wasn't terribly busy anymore. I didn't even mind paying for it. Death has been rough on the English language, and Charlotte's less articulate now than when she was alive. But still, Charlotte Bronte blurbed my novel, Mr. Splitfoot. I get the chills. I see the color of creativity, which is a light green. Then I see yellow or gold. I know it's interesting and should be great. Is it a true story? Is it a sad story? I get the chills even more. I feel a good vibration. I feel good about it. There's this attraction. Yes, it's what people want. Yeah, it's good. Of course it's fiction. I think it's a good one. The girl's not real. It's not a true story, which is good. It has a lot of good energy, and people will like it. They will keep reading it until the end. You know what I mean? It's got good motion. It's intriguing because a person will know there's something two-sided. I like the name, Mr. Splitfoot. It will sell because it's good. It's intriguing. Yeah, it's a good one. Charlotte Bronte, author of Jane Eyre. Thank you. Do we have question time or no?
We have time for one or two questions. So does anybody have a question? Our lucky one or two. Yes, and I'm going to bring the mic over so that we can all hear your question. Thank you very much.
I'm curious, is your mother still alive?
She is, yeah.
Okay.
She is. Mm-hmm.
And how about your grandparents?
My grandmothers both lived very long lives.
Right.
One lived till 97 and one lived till almost 102. There's a lot about both of the grandmas here. One grandfather I didn't know, and one grandfather I only knew very, very little. But my grandmothers were huge influence, and they're both heavily featured in here because one of them was a writer herself and kept an incredible memoir of her life on an Iowa farm as a girl. And she was born in 1900, so it's really,
Right.
a historical document. It's beautiful. And my other grandmother was very wonderful about language. She was the one who said to me, she was very religious, and I would go to church with her, and I'd get upset at the sexist language in her tradition. And she'd say, if you have a problem with the words, just change them. She's like, don't call it God, call it love. And she said that to me when I was 7 years old, and it was like, that's all I needed to know, that I can play with words, I can redefine whatever word hurts me, I can find a new one. And so she was really helpful with.
I was thinking to ask about the grandparents because it's so easy to go to our parents because most of us knew them well. But grandparents are distant, and yet they're the ones who have so much influence, even though we're not aware of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. I was lucky to have two grandmas. Yeah.
All right, we have time for one more question, so I'll come.
What inspired The Seas?
The Seas. Okay, that's a great question. So that's my first novel, for those of you guys who don't know, and it's about a girl who believes she's a mermaid. There's a couple of things that inspired that. One of them was I was sitting in the driveway looking at the blue blood in my wrist and thinking, that's so strange that so many blue states are without oxygen, like the sky, like the sea, like our blue blood. And so that was one thing. I was like, I want to investigate the color blue. And I wanted to do that on the surface of thinking about being a young woman trying to form an identity in a small town where everyone thinks they know exactly who you are. That met with the idea of the mermaid myth, which has always been highly troubling to me. I love mermaids. I mean, who doesn't love mermaids? And yet, it's almost as if we forget that they murder men, right? That we kind of gloss over that part, that they're murderers of men. And I was really troubled by that idea, and so I wanted to take that on in the seas. Thanks. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. This was so nice. Thanks.